Let me ask you something. What comes to mind when you think of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles? A movie from the early 90s? Maybe the comic series from the 80s through the 2000s? Action figures? The popular animated series? Well, my point here was to get to the video game series as one of the Turtles' most prolific forms of media, but honestly, they're kind of everywhere. And they have been since their beginning in the early 80s. While some of you watching this video likely gravitated towards the game featuring the radical reptiles, I'm sure many folks never even played a TMNT video game and still have fond memories of Leo, Mike, Raph, and Don doing their thing, thwarting the Foot Clan. But if you're like me and you grew up in the late 80s, early 90s, you probably have the greatest memories of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles as video game characters. Let's just skip right over that original NES title and talk about the kick-ass arcade games instead. The TMNT arcade game by Konami was one of the most well-regarded beat-em-up arcade games of the time, going on to define what fans of the Turtles would expect to see in any of their future video games. This arcade game saw a port on the NES that honestly was pretty damn cool and even featured more content in the arcade version. A direct console sequel as well as some spin-off beat-em-up games eventually led to the true arcade sequel in Turtles in Time. More likely than not, if you liked the original arcade game, you liked Turtles in Time. I mean, you get to fight freaking dinosaurs and chuck bad guys towards the screen, what's not to love? But then the late 90s happened, and time was not good for the Turtles. The original 80s cartoon series had ended, the video games that were coming out were not as notable as the arcade games, and really the entire gaming landscape was changing. This newfangled 3D gaming fad was in its infancy, and developers were struggling to make franchises or series that worked in the past fit for the future. People are still clamoring for new TMNT games from decades past, as evidenced by the upcoming release of the Cowabunga collection, which brings together precisely these old games. All the old NES beat-em-ups, their sequels, even Turtles in Time, heck, you could even play the Turtles fighting game in this bad boy. And while that scratches the itch of nostalgia, what it doesn't do is give us a brand new Turtles arcade experience. However, that issue has been remedied recently thanks to .emu and Tribute Games' Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Shredder's Revenge. Which answers the question, what if there was another TMNT game after Turtles in Time that was still the same formula and, honestly didn't really suck? The publisher, .emu, should be familiar. While they've ported over many retro games to the PlayStation 4, Steam, and beyond, they most recently in 2020 were known for bringing back the Streets of Rage series and Streets of Rage 4. And if you haven't played the Streets of Rage series yet, you really should. Okay, anyways, back to the Turtles. So Shredder's Revenge is basically everything fans of the older TMNT arcade games could want, just on newer consoles. You're still playing as Leonardo, Michelangelo, Donatello, or Raphael. Heck, you could even play as Splinter or April O'Neil this time. And you're still trying to stop Shredder and his Foot Clan from doing all kinds of nefarious deeds. I don't know what this guy's goal is sometimes in these games, because he just seems to make the most random choices, but whatever, here we are. Much like the arcade game and Turtles in Time, Shredder's Revenge is a multiplayer beat-em-up game that has you going from the left side of the screen all the way to the right side of the screen, beating up anyone that gets in your way. A variety of foot soldiers wearing conveniently different colors that always do the same attacks depending on said color are there with you along the way to make your path not as easy as it should be. At the end of each stage, it's customary to have a big boss battle, and you'll do these against Turtles series favorites. Bebop and Rocksteady are the first few. You'll see Slash, you'll see Kang, you'll see Shredder, and I won't spoil the rest, but honestly, no matter how you've experienced the Turtles, from the cartoons, the comics, or the movies, you'll definitely find something familiar here. Tribute Games has done something really special here by making this not an arcade game that's designed to eat all your quarters, but rather an arcade-inspired game that's supposed to be one that you can play with your friends and really just enjoy while you're sitting on your couch. In a nice addition, there's online multiplayer for up to 6 total players, which, as far as I know, only really rivals the X-Men game, which is also by Konami, so maybe we'll see that one next? One can dream. Giving the game a little bit of variety, you actually have a dodge button this time, which you can basically roll through and dodge attacks. You have a power-up meter, which you can use to deliver more devastating, almost screen-clearing abilities. There's about 16 locations to go through, with some of them being kind of repeats of other locations from previous games. So fully expect to get on some hover bikes and go across a seemingly infinitely long bridge as you try to stop a rampaging car. But if you've played the previous games, you kind of are expecting it, so it's good to see it here, and I can report back it's pretty well done. Outside of your standard arcade mode, where you have a few lives and try to make it to the end, there's also a story mode, which gives a little bit more variety, but is ultimately kind of the same thing. In story mode, you pick your turtle, you start at level 1, and you gain experience as you dole out damage to bad guys. Leveling up grants you more health points, more power-up bars, and even some new abilities that you can do, such as a jumping special attack. Story mode also offers a few collectibles that you can pick up, which are really not hard to find, as long as you're attacking every enemy and you notice the weird standouts like an odd-shaped door or a weirdly colored car, you'll find them all quickly. They don't offer too much of a challenge, but they do offer something to do besides just beating up the foot soldiers and bad guys, but I do wish the game offered a little bit more here. Yes, this is a tribute to arcade games, but we're kind of beyond the arcade now, and we could do a lot more with at-home multiplayer experiences. They almost kind of got there with the level up system, but when it just kind of makes every turtle feel the same, except instead of using swords, you're using sais or bows or camera stands, it doesn't actually offer much variety. In a roundabout way, I've been saying this the entire time we've been here, but Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Shredder's Revenge is completely grounded in nostalgia. And while sure, you don't have to be a Turtles fan, and you don't have to have played the previous games, but if you did, there's a lot more nods and callouts to previous games in the series that you'll definitely appreciate. Other little nods you wouldn't otherwise realize come from previous games, such as being able to throw enemies towards the screen, turtles falling in sewers and saying who turned out the lights, or the common enemy foot soldiers just doing random things in the background like cooking, baking. It all plays back to the fun nostalgia of the previous games. All around, this is a solid beat 'em up, and really, even if the nostalgia isn't for you, and if you've never grew up enjoying the Turtles, this is a fun starting place. Jumping over to graphics and audio, I am happy to report that this game looks, feels, and sounds just like the Turtles arcade game and just like the Turtles cartoon series. The backgrounds and stages are bright and colorful, they really do feel like they're pulled right from the cartoons, and there's even some nods to previous notes from the older game's soundtrack. For example, the boss battle music is almost lifted straight from the Turtles arcade game, and oh man, it made me feel like I was standing right at the arcade playing a game with my brothers and friends. It was really cool. With that in mind, everything is recorded new, so you're not listening to old soundtracks they just beefed up. This is all brand new recordings. There's even a fully reworked song of the original TMNT cartoon series theme song that plays at the very beginning that was really cool. The last thing I want to mention before we wrap all this up, just how fun Shredder's Revenge really is. Comparing Shredder's Revenge to Emu's previous work, Streets of Rage 4, it does feel very different. The Turtles and the Streets of Rage group, while they share a common bond in the genre of beat 'em up, they're very different in my opinion. Streets of Rage is a very good game, but it does feel kind of different than the Turtles. In that game, things are more serious. You're usually fighting drug dealers, there's guns involved, the backgrounds are dark and gritty. Whereas the Turtles, you're fighting these comical Foot Clans, everything is a robot, so there's no real violence. And everything is bright, colorful, and kind of funny. Thankfully, even now in 2022, you actually do have some alternatives that you can go for, including Emu's Streets of Rage 4. I feel like it's going to be hard to look at this game and not compare it to that one, so let's just get it right out there and say it. These are two different games, and it just feels great that we live in a world right now where both of them exist and we can enjoy them as we please. Once it was announced that Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Shredder's Revenge was coming to consoles in 2022, I was incredibly excited. On day one of getting this game, I knew I was going to enjoy it. I was hoping it would deliver on all of the nostalgia from the past, and I truly was not let down. If you're a fan of older TMNT games, if you're a fan of the cartoon series or the movies or the comics, really anything from the 80s, 90s Turtles fame, you have a lot to enjoy here, and I highly recommend playing this game. Publisher Emu now has two fantastic beat 'em up remakes under their belt, and I can only dream at what they're going to give us next. Maybe a sequel to X-Men? What about the Simpsons arcade game? That could be a cool new one. If they can make it as good as this game, then we'd be in for a real treat. And with that, I think it's safe to say that the Turtles are back in town. Now go out there and get
Yo mama.